We were thoroughly outnumbered by the German Luftwaffe, and our pilots were more or less, most of them, completely untrained. So the odds were very much against us. And by getting our planes up above, in the sky above them, so that when they appeared they could be shot at, gave them a huge advantage. And that was the only way that made it possible for us to win the Battle of Britain. I was 18 years old when I joined the WAAF. It was very exciting. It was the first time we'd been away from guidance of our parents. We were allowed to do what we wanted when we came off duty. We had friends amongst each other, amongst the other girls. We would go out together, and we would go to dances and things together. So part of our life was being young and having a good time. But the main part of it was always that you were on duty at time and you did what you were required to do and hadn't failed in any way, and then you were quite satisfied. Far end was a platform on which stood two uniformed RAF men with opticians' boards, four-sided boards with the letters from large down to small. And I sailed up, waiting for my turn, went up on the platform, read off all but the last two lines, and the chap said, "Right out." I said, "Well, I can read everything else." "No, you have to be able to read it all." So I said, "Well, let me put my glasses on and I'll read it." "You can't have glasses in the RAF." So I was on my way out, very dejected and feeling rather put out. And it suddenly occurred to me that if I joined the queue on the other side of the room with my glasses on, it would be easy to memorize those bottom two lines, take my glasses off before I got there, and pass my test, which is what I did, which is how I came to be a WAAF. I was hugely excited when she said that I was going to be on special duties. The only thing I could think, as it was so secret, was that I was to be a spy. And I imagined myself spying behind enemy lines, perhaps discovering some all-important secret that would help win the war. Well, I found out that I was not going to be a spy after all on the first day of training, when we were gathered together in a large room with a big table with a graph on it and a box of tiddlywinks in front of us. Each of us had different colours, and we had headphones on, and we were told to listen to what we were being told, and a voice would give us a graph reference, and we were to put the tiddlywink on the table in this position. And I was so bitterly disappointed. I thought, it is impossible that I'm going to be sitting here playing a convoluted game of Ludo. I won't be a spy, I won't be doing anything exciting, I won't be an ambulance driver, which I had thought about, and I could have cried. And then, of course, we started to be told what it was all about, what radar was all about, that magnificent thing which saw really the Battle of Britain through its bad days. The Dowding system involved a three-way chain, really, from the coastal radar stations that sent out signals to the airplanes and got positions back, and they would be put through to our earphones. and we would put them on the table. They would be sorted out by an officer behind us, standing behind us, and relayed through to the ops room. And from there, they scrambled the Spitfires and airplanes to intercept the enemy aircraft. So we were a three-way team. Any of the three were useless without the other two. So we were known as a chain. Without the Dowding system, which was very elementary, experimental still almost, we were so totally outnumbered by the German Luftwaffe, and with pilots, we were untrained, we weren't expecting the war, that there is no doubt we would have been completely and absolutely overrun very quickly. There would have been no Battle of Britain. It would have been over very quickly. The Dowding system enabled our few airplanes to be scrambled up higher than the incoming aircraft and ready to pounce when they saw them, and therefore knock down a lot more than they were able to knock down of us, because shooting down was much easier than shooting up. And the Germans didn't know how we were doing it. They never understood why we were waiting for them up in the sky when they arrived. I don't think anybody would argue with Winston Churchill's remark that were it not for the Dowding system, it's very doubtful if the Battle of Britain would have been won. Interestingly, at the start of the war, all the plotters, in fact the whole field room, were manned by men. I don't think it was considered that women were capable or suitable in any way for such a task. However, such was the shortage of manpower that they decided they needed women to replace the men for more active duties, and they started to try women. And the first year, I should think, I was there were probably 50-50 men, women plotters on the table at the same time. But gradually all the men were replaced, and towards the last years of the war, we were always all women. So I don't think that there was any point at which we felt that we shouldn't be there or they ought not to have replaced the men. I think we all felt that we had put the men in their places, quite honestly. After the war, when the men came home and took over their roles as head of the household, we weren't used to having heads of households. We were used to making our own decisions and taking care of ourselves and working out our problems. And I think it was responsible for quite a few breakups of quite a lot of marriages where men felt undermined and the women felt irritated that they were being pushed back into a position of inferiority. When I went on leave, my home was in Sussex, so of course a lot of the dog fights were going on overhead. And I used to think about my German friends because the year before the war I had had a year as a student in Germany, which was where I'd learned my German. And amongst the enjoyments that we had, there was a officer cadet training establishment where they were teaching the young cadets how to behave correctly in a formal dance. And there were partners required for these young chaps, and a group of girls and myself thought it would be fun to go, and we did. And so we met quite a lot of young Luftwaffe pilots. And I used to think back to those boys who were no different from our own cousins and students that we knew. They were friendly, they weren't Nazis, or they weren't politically interested. Like ourselves, they were interested in dancing, skiing, skating, doing all the things we used to do out there for fun. And I used to think to myself, well, there they are trying to kill each other. There's Wolfgang and Rudolf and the people that I used to ski with, and trying to kill my cousin Buzz. And it was a very strange situation, really. I never didn't consider them as the enemy. What would confuse me is how could they possibly be the enemy when they were such pleasant young people? It's a dreadful thing to say, but my war was exciting, interesting, worthwhile, and I consider I was extremely lucky to have been chosen to do the job that I did. Of course, although those 6 years were very memorable for many, many happy times, also looking back, there were very sad times. There were so many people that I knew who didn't come back, didn't survive. On the whole, I think we took the news of the process of the war very much for granted. It was on the news that we'd had so many planes shot down and we'd shot down so many. So there was no immediate sort of feeling of, I wonder if my cousin's the one that's going up above the sky. You didn't. But you were aware, and especially if, as we did indeed, have dates being asked out to a dance by a pilot, and then him not turn up on the evening and you knew he'd got shot down, that was always an emotional moment when you felt awful that they weren't there. And so, well, quite often I would say over half a dozen times I lost people who had invited me out and to whom I couldn't keep, or they couldn't keep the date. And there was one occasion quite far on in the war, I was up at Watnell at the time, 11 Group, and nothing was happening on the table because the weather had closed down and there was no flying. And the door opened on the balcony and in came this bomber crew from a Lancaster bomber. And miraculously they had obtained permission to come and find out how it was that the rescue craft had been waiting for them when they had ditched on their way back from a raid when they weren't able to reach the coast. And we explained everything, and there was a party in the mess that night, and so they were naturally invited to remain, and they stayed for the evening, and I spent most of the evening talking to the navigator, who was a charming chap, and we became friends and would have got married at the end of the war. He used to ring whenever he wasn't flying, and he hadn't rung, so I rang. And the adjutant said to me, "I'm very sorry to have to tell you, but he was missing." I went on as usual. That's all you could do. What good would it have been to have done nothing? No, I don't think it would have helped at all to have taken time off. In fact, it would be better to double up your shifts, keep your mind off things.